The day Earth was exiled from the Galactic Council started quietly, almost like any other day. Humans had been attending meetings for decades, sometimes welcomed, sometimes criticized, but never truly feared. The Council, a gathering of countless species, each with its own strengths and weaknesses, prided itself on diplomacy. They believed that with patience and negotiation, even the most unpredictable species could be controlled or guided. But Earth had always been a wild card. Its people were clever, resourceful, and stubborn in ways that no other species could match. That stubbornness, once considered a charm, had finally become a threat in the eyes of the Council. In the high chamber of the Council Station, the air was tense. Beings from hundreds of worlds hovered, floated, or walked across the polished floors. Some had 6 limbs, others none. Some communicated through color changes, others through sound waves that humans could barely hear. The humans present only, a handful, as Earth's representation was small compared to most powerful species, stood upright, silent, observing the murmurs around them. Their ambassador was calm, almost unnervingly so. When the vote was announced, it was unanimous in its cruelty. Earth was to be expelled. The words echoed across the chamber, though the voices remained formal, carefully hiding disdain. The accusations were typical. Humans were too unpredictable, too aggressive, too ambitious, and most damningly, unfit to be trusted with interstellar affairs. The Council claimed that humans could no longer be part of their carefully balanced system, and all privileges, trade agreements, and alliances were immediately suspended. Other species reacted with a mix of relief and excitement. Some had always feared Earth's potential. Others had tried to manipulate humans for their own advantage, and now felt free to do so. Few paused to consider what humans might do next. Many assumed that Earth would panic, perhaps collapse into infighting or plead for mercy like every other expelled species had before. But the humans did not. The ambassador, a tall, poised figure with a quiet authority, simply gathered their documents and turned to leave. There was no shouting, no desperate speeches, no dramatic displays. Every eye in the chamber followed the movement. There was a moment of stunned silence. The humans' calm was unsettling. A few species whispered among themselves, noting the peculiar serenity. It was as if the humans had been expecting this. Outside the chamber, the humans moved with purpose. The corridors of the station were long and metallic, filled with beings rushing to and fro. Some glanced at the humans with curiosity or amusement, wondering how such a small delegation could possibly matter. But the humans didn't care. They had a plan, a very clear plan. The ambassador spoke to their team in low, precise tones, outlining the first steps they would take. No one argued, no one hesitated. Each person seemed to understand the gravity of the moment. Back on Earth, the news spread quickly. Broadcasts reached every major city within hours. Governments convened emergency meetings, but there was no panic. Citizens, hearing the news, reacted with surprise, but not fear. They had always known humans were underestimated by others. Now, the rest of the galaxy had confirmed it. People on the streets continued with their daily routines, but behind every action, there was a renewed sense of purpose. As scientists, engineers, and strategists began working immediately. Factories switched to producing new technologies. Laboratories prioritized experiments that had once been considered risky or restricted, and shipyards started planning vessels that were far beyond anything the Council had ever allowed. Observers from other species, some of whom had secretly hoped Earth would fail, began to notice strange activity. Massive construction projects were appearing in orbit, faster and larger than anyone thought possible. Engineers and builders, both human and automated, worked in shifts around the clock. It was clear that the humans were not merely recovering. From the Council's decision, they were preparing for something Unprecedented, the Council had assumed humans would react with outrage or despair. They had imagined protests, diplomatic pleas, or even clandestine attacks. Instead, humans focused on themselves, on building and creating. They were quiet, almost eerily so, but their actions spoke louder than any words could. Their determination became visible not just on Earth, but across the solar system. The first hints of an independent fleet began to take shape, with small prototypes of spacecraft that pushed boundaries the Council had set for decades. Some minor species, those who had been watching Earth quietly for years, began to send observers and scouts. They were curious, cautious, and perhaps a little fearful. Humans, these species realized, were not predictable, not in the way that other species were. Every move was deliberate, every decision carefully calculated. They didn't lash out, they didn't beg, and they didn't negotiate, they acted. And the results were faster, smarter, and more effective than anyone expected. Within weeks, analysts from neighboring systems began to send reports back to the Council. Earth is mobilizing at an unprecedented rate, one report stated. They are constructing orbital facilities, upgrading their technologies, and preparing ships that surpass current Council designs. The humans are not panicking, they are evolving. Another noted that humans seem to be coordinating their efforts on multiple fronts: military, scientific, industrial, and cultural. Every aspect of their society was being optimized to ensure survival and independence. Meanwhile, ordinary humans continued their lives on the ground. Teachers, farmers, doctors, engineers, and laborers all contributed in some way. People who had never left their cities found themselves building components, F4 space stations, or creating materials for experimental technologies. It was a time of shared purpose, of unity that transcended politics and personal differences. The Council believed it had isolated Earth, but in truth, it had unleashed a determination that no one could contain. The exiled humans did not seek revenge, at least not openly. Their goal was simple: to prove that they could survive, thrive, and even surpass the species that had rejected them. They were not looking for approval. They were building a future on their own terms. That quiet confidence, that single-minded focus, became a message to the rest of the galaxy. Humans were no longer dependent on the Council, and they would not be underestimated again, not as the weeks turned into months. The first visible signs of Earth's response appeared in orbit. Satellite clusters, research stations, and shipyards began to operate almost autonomously, managed by human intelligence and decision-making systems that integrated hundreds of disciplines. Ships designed for exploration, defense, and logistics were seen moving in test patterns. Minor species watching from afar noted that humans were doing something radical. They were combining technology, strategy, and resource management in ways no other species had tried before. The Council continued to watch, increasingly uneasy. They had thought expulsion would weaken Earth. Instead, it was sparking a transformation. Reports of new energy sources, advanced propulsion tests, and coordinated human teams spread across the galaxy, causing murmurs of concern among Council members. How could a single exiled species accomplish so much so quickly? The answer, they realized too late, lay in the humans themselves. Humans were resilient. They were inventive. They were willing to take risks that others would not. Most importantly, they were united by a vision of their own making, not one imposed by external authority. The Council's decision, meant to punish them, had instead catalyzed an unprecedented period of growth and preparation. Observers noted with awe and a hint of fear that humans had already begun laying the foundations of what might one day become something far greater than anyone had imagined. In the quiet of Earth's command centers, the ambassador finally addressed their team. No fanfare, no speeches for the cameras, No statements to alien media. Just words meant for those who understood. They underestimated us. They always do. Let's make sure the galaxy never forgets why. And with that, humans moved forward. Not as victims, not as petitioners, but as architects of their own destiny. The Council might have expelled them, but Earth was far from defeated. In fact, it was only beginning to rise by the end of that first month. Earth had transformed the challenge of exile into the spark of a new era. Ships, technologies, and plans were all being prepared for a future that no one yet fully understood, but that humans were determined to shape. The rest of the galaxy began to watch more closely now, realizing that the species they had tried to sideline might soon redefine the rules entirely. And all of this had started simply with a calm walkout of a council chamber, an expression of quiet determination, and the unshakable belief that humans could do what no one else believed possible. After the shock of being expelled from the Galactic Council, Earth did something that surprised the galaxy. It did not react with anger or despair. There were no protests, no desperate pleas for mercy, and no dramatic speeches broadcast to alien worlds. Instead, humans focused on what they could control themselves. They rolled up their sleeves and got to work, quietly, but with a determination that would soon become legendary. Back on Earth, the leaders of every major sector gathered in secure command centers. Scientists, engineers, military strategists, and industrial managers all came together. They did not argue or blame one another. They did not panic. Instead, they immediately started reorganizing every system that could help the planet survive and thrive independently. From energy production to transportation, from medical research to communication networks, everything was examined, optimized, and coordinated. Factories shifted production lines. Instead of routine goods for daily life, they started building components for new spacecraft, orbital platforms, and advanced machinery. Engineers and technicians who had once specialized in mundane systems now focused on experimental technologies, some of which the Council had previously restricted. Laboratories across the world suddenly became hotbeds of creativity and innovation. Experiments that were once considered too risky or too expensive were now funded and prioritized. It was a full-scale mobilization, but one that was organized, efficient, and unstoppable. People on the streets noticed the change, even if they did not fully understand it. Ordinary citizens saw new factories springing up, new technologies being tested, and massive construction projects expanding rapidly. School children learned about advanced engineering projects as part of their curriculum. Universities became research hubs, and even small towns contributed by producing materials or supplying food and resources for massive new programs. There was a sense of shared purpose that had never existed before. While humans worked, observers from other species began to take notice. Some were curious, some were cautious, and some were quietly worried. They had assumed that humans would crumble after being expelled from the Council, that the planet would descend into chaos. Instead, what they saw was something different. A species that turned setback into opportunity, disappointment into action. Minor species in nearby systems sent scouts to watch, and reports began to reach the Council. Analysts were shocked by what they saw. Earth is mobilizing at a rate no one has ever witnessed, one report said. They are building orbital facilities faster than any Council-approved plan. Their technology is evolving rapidly, and their society is functioning with unity we did not expect. Another analyst noted, they are not just preparing to defend themselves, they are preparing to grow, expand, and innovate beyond anything in our records. Humans were doing all of this quietly. There were no loud declarations to alien worlds. No one threatened the Council or demanded recognition. Instead, actions replaced words. Every project, every construction effort, and every research initiative was a statement. Humans would no longer wait for permission. They would no longer rely on outsiders. They would create their own future. In orbital shipyards, engineers worked around the clock. Massive platforms that once produced satellites now became the construction sites for spacecraft designed for speed, endurance, and flexibility. Some of the vessels were intended for exploration, others for transport, and some for defense. The designs were bold, unconventional, and sometimes even breathtaking. Humans experimented with propulsion systems, energy sources, and materials that other species had dismissed as impossible. Even minor failures were quickly corrected, lessons learned, and improvements implemented. The pace was staggering. On the ground, resource management became a priority. Mining operations were expanded, factories retooled, and supply chains coordinated in ways that had never been seen before. Transportation systems moved components across the globe with precision, and new manufacturing processes allowed humans to create equipment that would have taken decades under ordinary circumstances. Each small success encouraged the next, creating a cycle of innovation and efficiency that no external power could slow. Even culture adapted to this new reality. Art, music, and literature reflected the determination and hope of a species taking control of its own destiny. Television and media celebrated achievements, not as entertainment, but as examples of human ingenuity and resilience. Stories of ordinary people contributing to extraordinary projects inspired others to join in. The morale boost was immense, and it reinforced the sense that this was a collective effort. Everyone had a role, and every role mattered. Meanwhile, outside of Earth, other species were beginning to whisper about what was happening. Some governments quietly asked for technical details, hoping to learn from humans. Others began considering alliances, recognizing that Earth was no longer a weak, dependent planet. The Council, which had hoped to isolate and weaken Earth, began to feel unease. The reports that reached them were troubling. Humans were not just surviving, they were preparing for something greater. Some humans traveled to nearby systems as observers and scouts. They studied technologies, resources, and potential allies. They did not invade or conquer. They learned. They built relationships with minor species who were impressed by humans' discipline, innovation, and fairness. Slowly, networks began to form, networks that would one day become the backbone of an independent human presence in space. Even the military was reorganizing, but in a way that was different from what the Council expected. Instead of large, obvious fleets designed to intimidate, humans focused on efficiency, adaptability, and intelligence. Small teams, highly trained and coordinated, could achieve more than a massive fleet of conventional vessels. Strategy became about flexibility, preparation, and speed, rather than brute force. It was a subtle but powerful shift that left other species scratching their heads. On Earth itself, communities worked together like never before. Cities organized volunteer programs to support orbital projects. Scientists consulted with local industries to produce specialized components. Engineers traveled between continents to oversee construction and experimentation. There was a sense of unity that transcended national or cultural differences. The challenge of Council exile had turned into a shared mission, something everyone could contribute to, something everyone could take pride in. Months passed, and the progress was undeniable. Orbital stations grew larger and more sophisticated. Spacecraft prototypes began to test in orbit, moving faster and farther than anyone had predicted. Humans were quietly testing technologies that the Council had long forbidden, from new propulsion systems to advanced materials. Every test brought new insights, and every success fueled further development. The Council, watching from afar, could no longer dismiss Earth as a minor or weakened planet. Analysts reported that humans had not only stabilized their own world, but were also expanding their capabilities at a pace unmatched by any other species. Plans that had taken decades in the past were now being achieved in months. Other species, too, began to take note. Some sent emissaries to learn. Others quietly feared what humans might become. Throughout all of this, the humans themselves remained remarkably grounded. They did not boast, they did not seek glory, and they did not show anger. Instead, they focused on the work, on solving problems, and on building a future. Their calm determination became their most powerful tool, more influential than any weapon or fleet. They understood that true strength did not come from intimidation. It came from preparation, innovation, and unity. By the end of the first year, Earth had transformed. It was no longer just a planet struggling to survive outside the Council. It had become a hub of innovation, coordination, and preparation. Orbital stations buzzed with activity. Spacecraft were being tested at unprecedented rates. Resource networks, scientific laboratories, and strategic planning centers operated in perfect harmony. Humans had taken a setback, their exile, turned it into a historic opportunity. Observers from other species now understood something that the Council had ignored. Humans were not predictable, and that unpredictability was their greatest strength. They did not react like other species, and they did not follow the same logic. They adapted, innovated, and persevered. What had been meant as punishment, the expulsion from the Council, had become a catalyst for transformation. And yet, despite all this progress, humans never forgot the purpose behind their efforts. They did not seek revenge. They did not seek domination. They sought independence and the ability to shape their own destiny. Every decision, every project, and every innovation was guided by this principle. The rest of the galaxy could watch, worry, or speculate, but humans would continue their work quietly, efficiently, and with an unshakable belief in what they could achieve. By the time the first orbital fleet was ready for deployment, Earth had already demonstrated that it could operate independently, intelligently, and effectively. They had turned exile into opportunity, weakness into strength, and isolation into a platform for growth. The rest of the galaxy could now see clearly that Earth was no longer just a member of the Council. It was a force to be reckoned with. The lesson was simple. Humans did not need the Council's approval. Humans did not need permissions. As humans quietly prepared, the next stage of their plan began, the creation of an independent fleet. It was not merely a collection of ships. It was a carefully designed system, an extension of human ingenuity and determination. The Council had long controlled space travel rules, limiting what humans could develop. Now, freed from those restrictions, humans could innovate without bounds. Engineers, scientists, and strategists worked together to design vessels that combined speed, resilience, and adaptability. Shipyards around the planet and in orbit became hubs of tireless activity. Large platforms that once produced satellites now handled the construction of multi-purpose spacecraft. Each vessel was built with modular designs, allowing it to change roles depending on the mission. Some ships were for exploration, equipped with advanced sensors and life support systems to survive extreme environments. Others were for defense, armed with technology humans had quietly perfected over years of experimentation. Some ships carried cargo, designed to move resources efficiently between Earth and distant colonies. Testing was rigorous and continuous. Prototype ships were sent to the edge of the solar system and beyond, moving faster and farther than anyone had expected. Some tests failed, but failures were seen as lessons, not setbacks. Engineers would analyze every detail, refine the designs, and try again. In a few months, the fleet had grown beyond what most species considered possible in a single year. What set the human fleet apart was not just technology. It was strategy. Humans did not rely on sheer numbers or brute force. They focused on flexibility, intelligence, and coordination. Small teams of ships could achieve what massive fleets could not. Humans practiced tactics that combined speed, surprise, and resourcefulness. Every maneuver, every test run, and every simulation was part of a larger plan. A fleet that could defend Earth, explore new regions, and establish a presence beyond. The solar system. While all this happened, ordinary humans contributed in countless ways. Factory workers built components that would be assembled into spacecraft. Scientists refined propulsion systems and energy sources. Technicians maintained orbital stations and testing facilities. Even students and volunteers found ways to help, whether by contributing data, running simulations, or developing new software. It was a collective effort, a shared mission, and it gave every person a sense of purpose. Observers from other species could no longer ignore what was happening. Some minor species sent envoys to watch, curious about human methods. They were astonished. Humans combined precision, creativity, and determination in ways that other species had never seen. Reports reached the Council detailing the speed and efficiency of Earth's progress. Analysts noted that humans were not simply building ships. They were building an entire system capable of operating independently, efficiently, and intelligently. The Council began to feel uneasy. They had expected Earth to falter after exile. Instead, humans were demonstrating capabilities that rivaled, and in some cases exceeded, what the Council itself could deploy. Ships moved faster, adapted better, and were controlled with coordination no other species had attempted. Council members whispered among themselves, realizing too late that they had underestimated humans. Human leadership remained calm throughout. No one sought revenge. No one aimed to provoke. Instead, every decision was guided by logic, preparation, and long-term vision. Every project, every experiment, and every test was part of a greater goal, establishing Earth as a force that no one could ignore. As the fleet grew, humans began to test interstellar communication networks. They developed systems that allowed instant coordination between ships, orbital stations, and ground command centers. These networks were secure, resilient, and adaptive, ensuring that humans could operate even in regions far beyond the solar system. The Council had never allowed such freedom, fearing that humans might gain a strategic advantage. Now, humans were using that freedom to create something entirely new, a fleet that was fast, smart, and self-reliant. Even as the fleet developed, humans began training the personnel who would operate it. They were not just engineers or pilots. They were problem solvers, thinkers, and leaders capable of handling any situation. Simulation exercises became a regular part of life, preparing teams to respond to emergencies, explore uncharted space, and establish contacts with other species. Humans were building more than ships. They were building expertise, teamwork, and confidence. The first fleet launch drew quiet attention from neighboring species. A few curious observers watched from distant stations, expecting failure or chaos. Instead, they saw precision, order, and an almost seamless integration of technology and human skill. The fleet tested maneuvers, coordinated movements, and exploratory missions with remarkable efficiency. Every small success was documented, analyzed, and improved upon. The fleet was not just a military asset. It was a statement. Humans were announcing, without words, that they could defend themselves, explore space, and operate independently. They were no longer a species confined by Council rules. They were becoming pioneers, innovators, and leaders. And they were doing it quietly, calmly, without the need for grand speeches or threats. By the end of the first operational year, the human fleet had grown into a powerful multi-purpose force. Ships of all types were ready for deployment. Command centers coordinated missions across Earth and its orbit. Scientists and engineers continued to refine technology, while strategists simulated every possible scenario. The fleet was flexible, resilient, and capable of responding to any threat or opportunity. Outside Earth, the galaxy began to take notice. Minor species were drawn to humans, intrigued by their capabilities and the fairness with which they treated allies. Even some larger species that had once dismissed humans as weak or unpredictable began reconsidering. Reports of the fleet's abilities spread quietly, but the message was clear. Humans were no longer dependent on the Council. They had the knowledge, the technology, and the organization to act independently. Humans themselves remained grounded. They did not boast, they did not seek recognition, and they did not act out of anger. Every success was met with analysis, improvement, and preparation for the next challenge. Their calm determination, combined with relentless innovation, became their most powerful tool. The fleet was impressive, but it was the people behind it, their vision, skill, and unity that made it extraordinary. By the end of the year, Earth's fleet had become a symbol of human capability. It was proof that exile could be transformed into opportunity, that limitation could spark creativity, and that determination could overcome any obstacle. The ships themselves were impressive, but even more impressive was the system that humans had built, a network of technology, strategy, and people capable of operating independently across space. The Council could no longer ignore Earth. Analysts and envoys reported on the fleet's capabilities with increasing concern. It was clear that humans had transformed exile into power. They had created a fleet that could defend, explore, and establish presence beyond the solar system. And more importantly, they had created a force that reflected something uniquely human: ingenuity, perseverance, and unity in the face of adversity. As the fleet prepared for its first extended mission beyond the solar system, humans on Earth watched, contributed, and prepared for the future. They had built more than ships. They had built the foundation of independence, the proof that humans could achieve greatness without relying on others. The fleet was ready, but the people behind it were even more prepared, adaptable, resourceful, and determined to shape their own destiny. In the end, the birth of Earth's independent fleet was not just about ships or technology. It was about a species proving that it could rise above challenges, take control of its own future, and act with intelligence and determination. It was a quiet, unassuming revolution, one that sent a message across the galaxy. Humans were no longer a minor species to be dismissed. They were becoming a power capable of shaping the future itself. Once the independent fleet was operational, humans began the next phase of their plan: expansion beyond the borders that had once limited them. The galaxy, vast and mostly unexplored, offered countless opportunities. Humans were not motivated by greed or conquest. They were driven by curiosity, survival, and the desire to build a future free from interference. They wanted to understand the unknown, establish safe footholds, and create systems that could sustain life far from Earth. Colonies were carefully planned. Scientists, engineers, and logistic teams worked together to identify planets and systems that were habitable or could be made habitable. They analyzed atmospheres, climates, and resources, ensuring that each location could support human life and growth. Unlike many other species that simply claimed worlds for power or influence, humans focused on making life sustainable. Every colony was designed with infrastructure, agriculture, energy, and communication networks in mind. Nothing was left to chance. The first few colonies were within the solar system. Humans terraformed and developed moons and planets that had previously been considered marginal. They used advanced technology to stabilize environments, generate breathable air, and produce food. These projects took years to perfect, but the results were extraordinary. Colonies thrived, and humans proved that even worlds considered inhospitable could support life with proper planning and ingenuity beyond the solar system. Humans sent exploratory teams to uncharted regions. Ships traveled for years at a time, gathering information, mapping star systems, and identifying resources. Every mission was carefully documented, creating a growing database that would serve future colonies and fleets. Humans learned to live off the land, adapt to strange conditions, and work with the unique challenges of each new environment. They were explorers, scientists, and pioneers all at once. Minor species in nearby systems began noticing these efforts. They watched with curiosity and sometimes awe as humans established functional, thriving colonies in areas the Council had ignored. Many species were impressed by the efficiency, organization, and adaptability of human settlements. Humans treated their new neighbors fairly, offering trade, knowledge, and cooperation rather than dominance. This approach drew attention and loyalty from worlds that had once been on the fringes of the galaxy. Trade networks began forming naturally. Humans did not impose their will, but instead shared technologies and resources with other species willing to cooperate. Small alliances developed around shared interests, mutual benefits, and respect for each species' autonomy. These networks strengthened Earth's position in the galaxy without provoking hostility, by showing that humans could be reliable partners. Rather than conquerors, Earth quietly expanded its influence. As humans spread further, they discovered regions with unique challenges. Some planets had harsh weather, unpredictable magnetic storms, or limited natural resources. Others had wildlife and ecosystems completely unknown to humans. Each challenge was met with preparation, research, and creativity. Engineers designed protective habitats, scientists developed sustainable food systems, and medical teams ensured that humans could survive even the harshest conditions. The ability to adapt became one of the defining traits of the species. Meanwhile, humans began establishing orbital outposts and stations around key planets and trade routes. These stations served multiple purposes. They monitored activity in the surrounding systems, acted as logistical hubs, and provided safe harbors for ships traveling long distances. Each station was equipped with research facilities, living quarters, and defensive systems. Unlike other species, humans focused on sustainability and flexibility rather than brute strength. The stations could be upgraded or repurposed as needed, reflecting the adaptive mindset that defined human expansion. Back on Earth, the success of these colonies inspired further innovation. Scientists and engineers developed new propulsion methods to shorten travel times, while communication systems improved to allow real-time coordination across light years. The human fleet and the colonies were no longer separate. They operated as a connected network, with Earth as the central hub. Every discovery, every success, and every challenge fed into a growing system of knowledge that made future expansion faster and more efficient. Humans also began documenting their experiences carefully. Reports, journals, and logs from explorers, engineers, and scientists were shared openly within the species. Mistakes were analyzed, successes celebrated, and knowledge was passed on to every new mission. This culture of shared learning accelerated progress, allowing humans to solve problems more quickly than any single individual or team could manage alone. Other species slowly realized that humans were not expanding recklessly. They were thoughtful, deliberate, and careful. Humans did not take worlds by force. They did not subjugate other species. Instead, they built partnerships, learned from their surroundings, and adapted to challenges in ways that were both effective and sustainable. This approach made humans respected, and sometimes admired, by species that had once underestimated them. As the Terran sphere, the growing human-influenced region expanded, humans began developing semi-autonomous colonies that could govern themselves while maintaining connection to Earth. These colonies were not just outposts. They were functional societies with their own culture, governance, and economy. Humans understood that independence encouraged resilience. By empowering colonies to manage their own affairs, they created a network that was flexible and capable of surviving disruptions. Meanwhile, the Council, which had hoped Earth's exile would weaken the species, began to worry. Reports reached them of colonies thriving far beyond previously explored regions, of humans establishing trade networks, and of species willingly aligning with Earth. The Council realized, perhaps too late, that humans were not just surviving, they were creating a system that could rival the old interstellar order. Exploration and expansion also brought new discoveries. Humans encountered unusual phenomena, binary star systems, planets with extreme gravity, and ecosystems entirely unknown to science. Each discovery was carefully studied and used to improve technology, infrastructure, and survival strategies. Humans combined curiosity with practicality, turning each challenge into a stepping stone for further advancement. Despite their growth and expansion, humans remained grounded. They did not dominate their neighbors, nor did they impose their will unnecessarily. Their focus remained on cooperation, innovation, and preparation. Each colony, each outpost, and each fleet movement reinforced the idea that humans could act independently, efficiently, and responsibly. This approach allowed the species to expand without provoking large-scale conflicts by the time humans had established multiple colonies across the nearest star systems. They had effectively created a network of influence. These colonies shared resources, information, and security. They operated under principles of mutual respect, fairness, and collaboration. The Terran sphere was growing not through coercion, but through example. Humans demonstrated that independence, ingenuity, and cooperation could create thriving communities in the harshest environments. Observers from other species were increasingly aware that humans were becoming a force to be reckoned with. Some minor species joined willingly, bringing their own skills, resources, and knowledge. Others watched cautiously, unsure of what humans might do next. The Council, which had expelled Earth thinking it would weaken them, now faced a species that was not only surviving, but also building an empire of its own. One colony, one fleet, and one trade network at a time. Humans themselves remained focused on the future. Every colony, every fleet mission, and every technological advance was part of a long-term vision to create a network of thriving human and allied communities capable of existing independently from the Council. They were explorers, scientists, engineers, and leaders. They were also teachers, mentors, and innovators, ensuring that every generation could contribute to this growing interstellar civilization. In the end, human expansion beyond known borders was not just about territory. It was about preparation, cooperation, and the quiet establishment of a network that could sustain life, knowledge, and influence far beyond Earth. Humans had taken exile and turned it into opportunity, proving to themselves and to the galaxy that they could not only survive, but thrive. Each new colony, each new outpost, and each new alliance was a testament to human ingenuity, determination, and vision, a vision that would continue to shape the future of the galaxy for generations to come. As human colonies and fleets expanded, the Galactic Council began to take notice in ways they had not anticipated. For years, the Council had believed that Earth was unpredictable but ultimately limited. They assumed that once humans were expelled, their growth would stagnate and their influence would fade. Instead, reports arriving from neighboring systems told a very different story. Humans were not only surviving but thriving, and the speed and efficiency of their expansion were causing concern. Analysts sent from the Council to monitor Earth's progress were astonished. They saw fleets being tested and deployed with remarkable coordination. They observed colonies that were self-sufficient, technologically advanced, and strategically located. Even minor species that had once been ignored or dismissed were now willingly cooperating with humans, drawn by the practical approach, fairness, and resourcefulness that characterized human expansion. The Council's diplomats and strategists quietly whispered among themselves, realizing that their underestimation of humans had been a serious mistake. At first, the Council attempted to maintain composure. They sent envoys to Earth, seeking to re-establish contact under the guise of diplomacy. These envoys arrived expecting hesitation, bargaining, or perhaps a show of desperation. Instead, they were met with calm professionalism and quiet authority. Humans listened politely, exchanged information when necessary, but made it clear that they no longer required the Council's guidance or approval. Every word, every gesture reinforced a single truth. Humans were independent, capable, and fully prepared to chart their own course. The Council's unease grew. Trade routes that had long been under their control were shifting as humans established their own networks. Supplies, technology, and knowledge were flowing in directions the Council had not intended. Species that had once relied on the Council's authority began exploring alliances with humans instead. These were not forced agreements or acts of submission. They were voluntary, born from recognition of human efficiency, fairness, and reliability. Slowly, the Council realized that their decision to expel Earth had backfired spectacularly. Meanwhile, humans continued to build their systems and networks. Communication hubs linked colonies across star systems, allowing real-time coordination. Fleet exercises and exploratory missions were synchronized in ways previously unheard of. Humans maintained detailed logs and analyses of every operation, constantly improving and refining strategies. Every new success added to the foundation of a civilization capable of independent operation, resistant to disruptions, and prepared for challenges far beyond the immediate solar system. Observers from other species were beginning to speak openly about Earth's rise. Minor species began joining the human network voluntarily, providing technology, resources, and knowledge. Some medium-sized species cautiously proposed trade agreements. Even a few larger species, previously skeptical or hostile, began engaging. Diplomatically, curious about the efficiency and fairness that defined human expansion. Earth's influence was growing, not through force, but through action, competence, and trust. Within the Council, debates became tense. Some members wanted to confront Earth militarily, believing that human influence must be curtailed before it became uncontrollable. Others argued for caution, warning that humans were unpredictable and that conflict could escalate beyond expectations. Analysts presented reports showing the speed of human technological development, their self-sufficient colonies, and their strategic deployment of fleets. Council members were forced to admit that humans were no longer just another species, or an emerging superpower capable of rivaling the Council itself. The first attempts at intimidation failed. Humans responded not with aggression, but with clear statements of independence. They did not boast, threaten, or attempt to dominate. Instead, every action reinforced that humans were capable of defending themselves, maintaining their colonies, and operating across space without reliance on the Council. It was a quiet, powerful demonstration of authority. Humans did not need to assert dominance. Their competence alone commanded respect. Trade and diplomacy became tools of influence rather than instruments of subjugation. Humans offered assistance, technology, and expertise to species willing to cooperate, but they never imposed their will. Their colonies served as examples of what could be achieved through preparation, innovation, and careful planning. Other species noticed that humans were reliable partners who could achieve results, and word spread across systems that aligning with humans brought tangible benefits. The Council's attempts to regain control or influence were further undermined by the growing interconnectivity of the human network. Fleets could move quickly to respond to threats. Colonies could support one another, and communication was seamless across vast distances. Humans had created a system that was adaptive, resilient, and efficient, making the Council's traditional strategies of control ineffective. Even as Earth's influence expanded, humans remained grounded in practical concerns. They continued improving technology, exploring new systems, and supporting colonies. Every achievement was met with analysis and further innovation. Success was never taken for granted. Failure was never feared. Each event was a lesson, building, experience that would benefit the entire species. This methodical, disciplined approach allowed humans to stay ahead of potential rivals, including the Council. By now, the Council could no longer ignore reality. Humans had transformed exile into an opportunity for growth and independence. They had created fleets capable of exploration and defense, colonies that were self-sufficient and technologically advanced, and a network of influence that was respected by other species. The Council's former assumption that humans would weaken without their approval was now clearly false. Some Council members attempted to negotiate, hoping to reintegrate humans into the fold. Envoys were sent again, proposing limited agreements, shared technologies, and trade arrangements under Council supervision. Humans listened respectfully, offered feedback, and acknowledged the proposals, but they were clear that any agreements would be on Earth's terms. Humans no longer required permission, guidance, or protection. The power dynamic had shifted. At the same time, human fleets were exploring deeper into the galaxy. Colonies were established in previously ignored or unreachable regions. Humans were discovering resources, new scientific phenomena, and potential allies. Each step was planned with care, ensuring that expansion was sustainable, secure, and beneficial. Humans were not acting recklessly. They were building a foundation for long-term growth and security. By the end of this period, humans had effectively proven that they could operate entirely independently of the Council. Their colonies were thriving, fleets were operational and strategically coordinated, and diplomatic and trade networks extended across multiple star systems. Humans had achieved what many had thought impossible. They had turned punishment into opportunity and exclusion into strength. The lesson for the Council was unavoidable. Humans were no longer a minor, unpredictable species that could be dismissed. They were an emerging power with influence, technology, and strategy that could rival any established interstellar authority. Attempts to intimidate or control them were futile, and efforts to integrate them back into the Council would require negotiation on terms dictated by Earth. Humans had demonstrated a new model of power. It was not based on coercion, fear, or domination. It was based on competence, preparation, cooperation, and adaptability. It was a quiet authority, visible not in words or declarations, but in actions and achievements. Every colony, every fleet, maneuver, and every alliance reflected this philosophy. As the Council struggled to come to terms with reality, humans continued their work. Expansion, innovation, and cooperation remained the focus. The species understood that true power came not from position or authority, but from the ability to act intelligently, efficiently, and ethically. Every decision, every action, and every accomplishment reinforced this truth. By the time the Council finally acknowledged the scale of human achievement, it was too late to regain control. Humans had created a network that was self-sustaining, technologically advanced, and strategically sound. Colonies thrived, fleets moved with precision, and other species willingly aligned with humans based on trust and demonstrated competence. The Council could no longer dictate terms or expect obedience. They had underestimated the resilience, ingenuity, and unity of humanity. In the end, humans had transformed exile into dominance, not through war or aggression, but through action, intelligence, and preparation. The Council's mistake had been clear. Underestimating humans had only accelerated their rise. By the time the galaxy fully realized the extent of Earth's power, humans had already solidified their position as a force that could not be ignored, respected not through fear, but through undeniable capability and vision. Empires built through conquest or fear, this new human empire grew through organization, collaboration, and mutual respect. It was a network of colonies, fleets, research hubs, and trade systems, all connected through careful planning, communication, and shared purpose. The backbone of the empire was its colonies. Every new settlement, from the nearest star systems to distant, uncharted worlds, was designed to be self-sufficient while remaining connected to Earth. Engineers and planners made sure that each colony had the infrastructure for energy production, food supply, medical care, and education. Communication networks linked every colony, allowing real-time coordination and sharing of discoveries. This ensured that the empire functioned as a cohesive system rather than a collection of isolated settlements. The fleet continued to expand, but its purpose shifted subtly. It was no longer just a defensive tool or an exploratory system. It became a symbol of presence and stability. Ships patrolled key regions, ensured safe trade routes, and assisted colonies with supplies and technology. Yet, humans remained careful not to impose control unnecessarily. Instead, the fleet represented reliability and support, reinforcing the idea that the empire was built on competence and trust rather than fear. Trade and diplomacy became central pillars of human influence. Species from nearby systems, impressed by humans' practical approach and fairness, began forming alliances. These partnerships were voluntary, rooted in mutual benefit rather than coercion. Humans shared technology, offered training, and exchanged resources, creating networks of cooperation that strengthened the empire's foundation. By demonstrating competence and reliability, humans earned respect and loyalty without resorting to threats or dominance. Back on Earth, innovation never slowed. Scientists, engineers, and strategists continued pushing the boundaries of technology. Energy systems were upgraded, communication methods refined, and research into propulsion, defense, and sustainability advanced rapidly. Universities and research centers became hubs not just for humans, but for allied species as well. Knowledge flowed freely, and the human empire grew intellectually as well as territorially. The empire's growth was carefully balanced. Expansion was deliberate, calculated, and sustainable. New colonies were only established when resources, technology, and personnel could support them. Exploration was thorough, with risks analyzed and mitigated. Humans avoided reckless conquest or unnecessary conflict. Instead, they relied on preparation, adaptability, and coordination. The empire thrived not because of force, but because of planning, ingenuity, and unity. As the human empire solidified, the Galactic Council watched uneasily. Their former assumption that humans could be marginalized was now entirely disproven. Earth had transformed punishment into power. Humans had created a system that was not only self-sufficient, but resilient, adaptive, and respected by other species. Council envoys, once accustomed to delivering instructions, now came seeking advice, cooperation, or alliance. The balance of power had shifted, and humans were at the center of it. Despite the empire's growth, human leadership remained grounded. Decisions were guided by long-term vision and practicality, not ego or ambition. Leaders focused on solving problems, supporting colonies, and fostering cooperation among species. Every project, from fleet construction to planetary development, emphasized efficiency, sustainability, and adaptability. Humans had learned that true strength came not from domination, but from competence, unity, and the ability to act decisively when necessary. human colonies began sharing governance models. Local councils managed day-to-day operations, while larger networks coordinated strategy, resources, and security. This decentralized approach allowed colonies to thrive independently while remaining aligned with the broader empire. It fostered resilience, creativity, and responsibility. Citizens felt empowered, and each colony became a living testament to human capability and vision. The human empire also prioritized culture, education, and knowledge. Schools taught science, engineering, ethics, and interstellar communication. Students learned not only how to survive and innovate, but how to cooperate with diverse species. Universities became centers for interstellar collaboration, hosting researchers from allied species and sharing discoveries freely. Knowledge, humans realized, was just as important as technology or fleets in building a lasting empire. As decades passed, humans explored farther reaches of the galaxy. They discovered resources, phenomena, and even new life forms. Each encounter was approached with curiosity, respect, and caution. Humans adapted to challenges, developed solutions, and shared their findings with allies. Expansion was not reckless, it was careful, deliberate, and sustainable, reflecting the core philosophy that had guided Earth since its exile from the Council. Meanwhile, the Council struggled to maintain relevance. Humans had demonstrated that power could be exercised responsibly, through preparation, competence, and collaboration. Their rise was not sudden or chaotic, but steady, consistent, and undeniable. Council members realized that they had underestimated a species capable of turning adversity into opportunity and exclusion into influence. In regions controlled or influenced by humans, societies flourished. Colonies developed thriving economies, scientific advancement accelerated, and alliances strengthened the empire. Conflicts were rare because humans focused on preparation, diplomacy, and cooperation rather than aggression. The human empire grew in influence not by instilling fear, but by demonstrating reliability, adaptability, and competence. By now, humans were recognized across many star systems as a species capable of leadership, innovation, and influence. Their reputation was built on results, not rhetoric. Observers, analysts, and envoys from other species spoke openly of human ingenuity, preparation, and fairness. The human empire was no longer a local phenomenon. It was an interstellar force respected and trusted across multiple systems. The fleets continued to explore and protect, while colonies became centers of learning, innovation, and culture. Humans maintained communication networks that spanned light years, connecting distant worlds into a single, coordinated civilization. Every new discovery, technological breakthrough, and strategic achievement strengthened the empire's foundation. Even after decades, humans never lost focus on the principles that had brought them this far: preparation, adaptability, cooperation, and unity. They understood that power without responsibility could lead to chaos, and they avoided the mistakes of many other empires before them. The human empire thrived because it was built on intelligence, ethical action, and collective effort, not domination or fear. By the time the Galactic Council fully acknowledged the reality of human achievement, it was clear that the age of Earth's marginalization was over. Humans had created a lasting system, a connected network of colonies, fleets, and trade that could operate independently, innovate continuously, and influence the galaxy without reliance on the Council. Exile had transformed into strength. Limitation had transformed into capability. Exclusion had transformed into empire. In the end, the human empire was not measured by the size of its fleets, the number of colonies, or the reach of its trade networks alone. Its true strength lay in the people who built it: engineers, scientists, strategists, educators, and ordinary citizens working together toward a shared vision. Their resilience, intelligence, and cooperation had turned adversity into opportunity, and potential into reality. Earth had proved to the galaxy, and to itself, the humans were not just another species. They were innovators, explorers, leaders, and builders, capable of shaping their own destiny. The human empire stood as a living testament to the power of preparation, ingenuity, and unity, a quiet but undeniable force that would continue to grow, thrive, and inspire for generations to come.